Welcome to Name 3 Songs. I'm Sarah Fagan.
I'm Jenna Million, and this is a podcast where we discuss feminist issues in music and pop culture, all while empowering fangirls.
Because let's be honest, fangirls knew about that band way before you did. And on this week's episode of Name 3 Songs, we're doing things a little bit differently because there's been something going on my corner of the internet, meaning hot gossip about film and TV stars, that I've been losing my mind over. And I've shared a little bit with Jenna about it, but I thought it would be more fun in real time to discuss this because we all love hot gossip and we all had so much fun with the Don't Worry Darling of it all. So if you haven't been paying attention, Glen Powell and Sweeney have been filming a rom-com in Australia as of late. And there's been lots of rumblings on the internet that the chemistry they are having is not just for the movie, but that they in fact have been having an affair. So we are going to be diving into this today.
It is very deep dive worthy. I'm basically doing a blind react for y'all. So if you're hearing this for the first time, I'm also hearing this for the first time. I've heard snippets here and there. I know generally what's going on, but we are getting into all of the juiciness. And I think also kind of tying it back to some of the movie stars of the 2000s and how this is different, how the trend cycles are different, and kind of watching how this plays out.
Yeah, so we have a really fun discussion in store for y'all. But of course, before all of that, we have to get into the fangirl nonsense of the week.
And there is a lot of fangirl nonsense of the week. And if you guys do want timestamps for any of this, we're going to put those over on our Instagram stories. We'll say that as a highlight if you want to come back to it later. But honestly, I don't feel like anything is going to be worth skipping today because there's just so much fun nonsense to get into. So we're going to have a cute, fun time this week. So with all that being said, Sarah, would you like to take it away with our fangirl moments of the week?
I mean, this has been a big week for me personally because Florence Pugh left her house.
For the first time since Don't Worry Darling?
That's always a big week for me.
I'm kidding.
No, she's been leaving her house a lot, but whenever she leaves the house, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for me.
What if there's a Twitter account that's Florence Pugh left her house? It's did Florence Pugh leave her house today?
Oh my God. I mean... And she leaves her house a lot, so it's always a big day. It's there's always potential for it to be a big day for me. There was the reopening of Tiffany Co's New York City Landmark store, and so a lot of celebs came out for the red carpet, and she once again was wearing the most gorgeous Valentino dress. Them working together is the best thing to ever happen to me personally. She looks so good all the time. I'm dead. And also, the dress is I don't even know. It's seafoam green, pistachio colored. I'm not good at this stuff, but it's my favorite color ever, and it looks so good on her. And I just love it because Florence Pugh knows she's hot and doesn't care that people know that she knows that she's hot. So whenever she does these red carpets or goes to events and looks amazing, she's posting so much on Instagram, and I'm like, girl, I'm obsessed with how much you're obsessed with yourself. It's amazing. And also the best part of it is that Tiffany Co specially made her a septum ring. And I feel
oh my God, really?
Yeah, so she got a Tiffany septum ring for the event. And I feel that's
I see that she's wearing it, but
yeah,
that's wild.
And I just feel that's so cool also because Tiffany Co I feel is old money jewelry, and the fact that they made her a septum ring, which is more a new hot girl thing to be doing, more younger thing. I feel that's a positive step forward for the brand as well.
Wow. Yeah, she looks really good. I feel every time I see a photo of her, she looks entirely different. And I'm just what do you actually look like?
I can't tell if that's a wig or her hair. Yeah. Because her hair's been just,
blown out. Yeah. Funny enough, I also have a Tiffany Co anecdote, which is that Jimin of BTS is an ambassador. And it was rumored that fans thought he might be at the event. We weren't sure. Dylan Sprouse was on the red carpet and he was or the carpet for this event, and he was guys, don't worry, Jimin is coming, and everyone's what? Which is also hilarious because I swear 2 days went by and I did not see any videos of Jimin at this event till 2 days later. And then finally I saw people who I think it was a video from inside the event, or Jimin walking in, but it was not the same carpet. So I was just did he go through a back entrance? I was very confused, or I just missed it. But that was my Tiffany anecdote.
I did think it was funny in the video though that Dylan Sprouse is I know you're not here for me, I know you're here for Jimin.
It is also funny that I just thought it was Cole Sprouse, and I'm oh my God, that's so annoying that he did that.
Yeah, I was like, no, it's Dylan. He's cool. He makes mead.
It's okay now because it wasn't Cole.
It's fine. Like, it's the good Sprouse twin. Also, in incredible fangirl news in regards to film and movies, there's been some more announcements for the Gladiator sequel of like who's going to be starring in this movie. And there's a little something for everybody. Some of the main cast that was announced was Paul Mescal, Barry Keogh, Joseph Quinn, and Denzel Washington. So like hotties for everyone. It's going to be a great time. If the first Gladiator is anything to go by, there will be no shirts involved in this movie. So
Lots to look forward to.
Lots to look forward to. Incredible news for all of the girlies.
Oh my god. I personally have been getting a lot of amusement out of all of the videos of Timothee Chalamet walking around New York City.
Why does he walk like that? Like,
I know. I think he's like, is he filming a commercial or is it a movie?
Yeah, he's filming a commercial, which is really funny because it's a commercial that's directed by Martin Scorsese.
Well, he was in that like really, really fancy, what was it, like Apple commercial or
Yeah,
something?
I think it's probably another Apple commercial, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because he's like showing up in like the most random parts of New York City. And people are just like, Ariana, what are you doing here?
But he like is a New York boy, so like it's really funny. But he's just like so tall and like gangly, and then he's like walking around like he owns the place. And I made this TikTok and I was like, Timothee Chalamet walking around the streets of New York City is very much giving Cole Sprouse and Harry Styles in the way that Cole Sprouse makes you want to punch him, but the aloofness of Harry Styles makes him somehow endearing.
That is very on point. But the funnier thing is that this man is 5'10", and he walks like
he has 6'4" energy.
He walks like a giraffe taught him how to walk. Like, I don't even like know how to explain it. Like, he walks like a drunk gazelle. Like, it's so weird. Like, his strides are so long. And I'm like, this man, like, somebody told this man when he was like 14, like, oh my god, you're gonna be 6'5", and he like mentally prepared to be 6'5", including like updating the way
energy.
He walked. Like, I don't
the bro
know.
energy he's radiating. Yeah, but there are really funny videos of fans like talking to him. Like, did you see the one where he's like on a subway car, and the fans like knocking on the window and she's like, Timmy, and he's like waving through the window and they're like having a conversation. It's so cute.
That was so wholesome. I was like, this is incredible. And in speaking of Timothy, Variety posted an article that said Timothee Chalamet and Zendaya only have an hour each day to film Dune Part 2 romance scenes at sunset because like they needed the lighting or whatever. And which is like really funny because like I'm just imagining that filming had to take like 2 years for them to get that correct. And also because like they have really good chemistry, but obviously like Zendaya and Tom Holland are a couple goals in Hollywood, obsessed with them. And our wonderful friend Larissa tweeted maybe the funniest tweet I've ever seen in my life as a quote tweet to this, which she goes, Tom Holland was on the surface of the sun using all of his force to get it to set faster. I just think it's funny because I feel like Timothée Chalamet and Tom Holland have like almost the same face. Like they both just look like really starved orphans. But the longer that Tom's been with Zendaya, the like better he's gotten at doing his hair and dressing. So like he's got a leg up on Timothy.
Speaking of things that our friend Larissa has tweeted, today, as of recording, Saturday, April 29th, it is the 15-year anniversary of the photo of Pete Wentz walking down the street and Bruno Mars looking back at him. And this photo is so funny. It never gets old. And Larissa tweeted, do you really want to know where I was April 29th? And this ties into my next story in a very roundabout way.
Jenna's been losing her mind for like a week.
I've been on Delulu mode this week. So Suga's album came out. Just stay with me. Suga's album came out last week. I didn't get a chance to talk about it on last week's podcast. I needed some time to digest and take everything in. And also, because he released this album, he also released a documentary that was like the making of this album, essentially. And it was over a period of years. In this documentary, he goes to Halsey's house because he's actually really good friends with Halsey. Halsey did a song with BTS a few years ago. But for some reason, Suga and Halsey are like besties. Like, they love each other. Suga goes to Halsey's house in like Malibu. Tell me why. Tell me what the first scene of him walking up to this house is him having a bro moment with Anthony Lee, which, like, also for most of you listening, you're probably not gonna know who this is. Okay, Anthony Lee is Halsey's manager, but in the years of like 2006 to like 2013, Anthony Lee was in a band called Action Item from New Jersey, friends with the Joe Bros. And the reason that I know this is because Sarah and I come from the Warped Tour bubble. And Action Item was very much a like kind of like a wannabe Warped Tour band, but like on the very like pop indie band side, kind of like the people who came up on the heels of like popularity of bands like Hot Shell Ray and like Walk the Moon and like Carly Rae Jepsen and like her collab with like Owl City. Like, I was unlocking memories, y'all, when I tell you I was doing a deep dive on like the 2013 Tumblr that like wasn't Lana Del Rey and Marina and the Diamonds. Okay,
like,
so I'm just
Action
like, this man.
Item, also just to paint a visual picture. Action Item is one of those bands where like every member of the band, their fits were a white shirt with like a suit vest top on top.
Yes. And like a fedora. Like, one person would be wearing a fedora.
There's always at least like one member in a fedora.
Yeah, like it was not good. So many people did it.
Someone had on a skinny scarf always. Like, that's the vibes.
And like on Instagram, everyone be posting a photo with like the Instagram filter that was that super like yellow tone filter that was like almost a sepia, but it was like blue dark tones and like yellow highlights. And like everyone wore Glamour Kills, which was also like a brand of like the Warped Tour. Look, if you know, you know, okay? I was literally going to Lulu mode over the fact that this man from this era is now like Halsey's man. To this day is Halsey's manager. They knew each other like from way back then. He became her manager, honestly, on an accident because she started getting like calls from people and she was like, I need someone to pretend to be my manager. And it was Anthony Lee. He's still Halsey's manager to this day. He's in the documentary, like hanging out with Suga. I'm like, this is so wild to me. Like, I have the most cringe photo meeting this man in the year 2013. But if we go back further, if we take the timeline, it goes back to this Pete Wentz photo on April 29, 2008. Pete Wentz paved the way for all of this to happen, you guys.
It is really funny because like when I was reminded, so our friend Cassie, who's been on the podcast before, reminded me last night, like this morning, whatever, that it was April 29th and therefore it's Pete Wentz-Bruno Mars Day. And I was like, oh my God. And so I thought for a second, like, wow, it'd be so crazy if like very soon after this, Bruno Mars got really famous, but Bruno Mars didn't get really famous until 2010, and this photo was from 2008. But the Pete Wentz being the most famous man in the internet, and I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, was like such a specific point in time in the world, and so many things had to have happened for Pete Wentz to be like the it boy, and like none of them make a lick of sense. None of it makes any sense, and it's so unhinged, and it's so funny because like if you unweave the music industry, like the amount of pop punk boys,
it all hinges around Pete Wentz.
Yeah, but also the amount of pop punk boys that are gonna fall out of like these like very integral weaves of the music industry.
And that's what I'm talking about with this Anthony Lee connection.
Yeah.
Like, essentially the popularity of Fall Out Boy in this specific time period led way for a lot of indie alternative pop punk bands to like this whole scene birthed out of like Fall Out Boy's popularity. And then like within that there were branches off of like the Somerset, the Maine, and then those bands like Action Item, those bands off of that are continuing to like ride on like the popularity of other bands. And that's why it's all connected, guys.
But also a lot of them like went in to become like songwriters or work in the industry, be managers, like Anthony, all of this stuff. And it's like the amount of times where like you shake a song and you're like, why are there like 3 pop punk boys on here that I haven't heard from in years?
Mod Sun coming back and like writing for like TXT and like all these other, like Mod Sun having a comeback.
Well, that was like that meltdown we were having
wild.
About those like teen boys from Florida who toured with All Time Low. Before you exit? Yeah, and how they wrote for,
Yes, so in doing all this Delulu mode, I was like, what is that band? It was like 3 brothers from Florida and they were like teenagers, but they were kind of like boy bander, but they wrote like pop rock music and they recorded All Time Low. And we were both like, who is it? This band called Before You Exit. They're like still together, but I recently found out, not recently, like 2 years ago, found out that they wrote a song for Monsta X, which is a K-pop group. Because this song, I was like, wow, this song is like so like American boy band. And I looked at who was credited, and it was all the people from Before You Exit. And I was like, this is insane. This is insane. The connections are insane.
Yeah, so every year on April 29th, we remember very fondly
Happy April 29th to those who celebrate.
Bruno Mars being excited that Pete Wentz exists, and also just how small the world really is.
Oh my god. Oh my god. It's so crazy. Thank you for coming with us on this very long tangent. All that to say, just coming back to the point of Suga, his album is incredible. He really has done a lot of masterful stuff. He's just like an insane musician, producer, storyteller. Like the lyrics he tells in his story is insane. His music videos for this comeback were insane. I haven't even had time to like convert Sarah on all of this yet, but we will get there one day.
Also, really quickly, before we get into all of today's important business, in normal news, I don't know if people have been paying attention to this, but this also feels like gossip. Disney is suing Ron DeSantis because Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, who's trying to be the president, who's like the worst man in all of the world. Basically, like Disney existed in like its own town, essentially, so that they could basically like have their own governing body and like make their own laws and shit. And Ron DeSantis was like, no, I hate you. And then when he did the Don't Say Gay bill, Disney's like, we don't like that. And there's lots of beef there. Apparently, Ron DeSantis got married at the Grand Floridian Hotel, which is a Disney hotel. And so Ron DeSantis is just a scorned Disney adult, which is the best thing also. And so there's just like all this like there's all this nonsense going on, which like the only way to cope with like Ron DeSantis existing is for me to just view it as silly little gossip right now, because this is funny that like Disney is like probably gonna ruin this man's life. Like it's gonna be incredible.
Get him.
Like honestly, this is gonna be the wildest thing ever if like Disney World is the reason why Ron DeSantis can't function anymore. Like this is gonna be the best thing to ever happen.
Oh my god. Without getting into like the painful reality of the world, Sarah, would you like to take us away with some silly little pop culture funsy nonsense?
Yes, we do have pop culture funsy nonsense to disassociate from America being on fire and the rest of the world probably also being on fire, but there's too much going on here for me to pay attention to anywhere else right now. So we have Glen Powell and Sydney Sweeney. And for those of you who may not be paying attention to like this area of pop culture, Glen Powell has most recently become more famous for being in Top Gun Maverick. He also was in The Switch Up, which was a Netflix rom-com with Zoe Deutsch, and everybody was like really obsessed with their chemistry and how like great they were. And there's lots of like fans like really petitioning for them to like be rom-com co-stars forever, which is so fun because personally, when I was younger, I was very anti-rom-com, and as I've gotten older, I'm like, why the fuck was I like this? Rom-coms are a gift.
Yeah, they are.
You can put your brain on easy mode and just have a grand old time.
Exactly. Literally me when I'm on Netflix, I'm like, how do I put my brain on easy mode?
I think he's also done like some TV show stuff. Like I have been like weirdly aware of him as a handsome man and not really known why for like quite some time. And then Sydney Sweeney is most famous for her tits being out on Euphoria because, as we all know, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the creator of Euphoria is a sick fuck. And she also was nominated for an Emmy for her role in the first season of White Lotus.
She's also famous because she like posted a family gathering photo and like her relatives are probably Trump supporters.
Yes, she's also famous for that. She's also known for I think she built her own car, so lots of guys were like, she's not like other girls, and she has big tits. We love her. So that's really funny. I feel like I'm sounding like very mean about Sydney Sweeney. I have nothing against her. I just think it's funny because she very much is what like boring men would like conflate into like their weird manic pixie dream girl. So like not 500 Days of Summer type, like cheerleader type of not like other girls where it's like, oh, she cheerleads and she makes cars. amazing. And I just think it's really funny
mainstream.
because based off of like reading interviews with her, like seeing her exist, like she seems very cool and like a nice person. And I feel like Chads of the world are like fucking obsessed with her. And I'm like, Sydney, no. Poor girl. But anyway, so that's some information about these two people and like who they are in Hollywood. But basically, for the last like month and a bit, Glen Powell and Sydney Sweeney have been filming a rom-com in Australia. So like the remote ends of the world, anything can happen in Australia because nobody knows where that is. It's so far away from everything and everyone that they know that literally anything can happen. And I feel like there's maybe less fear about it, which is funny. But there's been lots of clips going around on Twitter and TikTok, like of people filming the movie being filmed and being like, and also paparazzi photos and all that fun stuff where, because this is like a big deal, because I feel like since To All the Boys I Loved Before came out, like rom-coms have like slowly been making their way back into the zeitgeist because so many people were so obsessed with that film. And so I think people are once again being excited by rom-coms, being like, wow, we've been missing out on this, like, because we were in a rom-com dry spell, really. And I think that's also has to do with like feminism and like how feminism has moved from like the Julia Roberts and Kate Hudson era of rom-coms to now, and like having to like be okay with putting our brains on easy mode. And I think for a while we weren't, and like knowing how to like have rom-coms in this era of feminism, you know, but that's like that's a whole other can of worms. I'm getting too into name 3 songs and too far from gossip. But basically there's been lots of buzz around this film being made because Glen Powell could have chemistry with a rock. This man looks at anyone and they fall deeply in love with him, know nothing about him, but this man looks so easy to fall in love with. Just based, like, he just seems like a silly, goofy guy in like the best way possible. And I think that really was evident in also like him doing the switch up with Zoe Deutsch, because they also had like this crazy chemistry and so many people were like, oh my God, this is crazy. But I think because Zoe Deutsch is less of like a hot topic figure in the Hollywood gossip bubble than Sydney Sweeney is, I think that's why like that didn't get as much hype and discussion around it.
I mean, and there's the exes.
Well, we're gonna get to that, so I think that there wasn't like as much of that. But also at the time of them filming together, at least Glen Powell was single. But going into this Australian rom-com with Sydney Sweeney, Glen Powell came in tow with a girlfriend, and that's where things, like the gossip starts to be gossiping, because I think that, and this is just based off of like history of on-screen romances turning into affairs or just real life love stories and stuff like that. Like there's less excitement and less interest and intrigue in the chemistry between two co-stars if those two co-stars are not attached. And I feel like we kind of touched on this a little bit in like our catfight episode that we did, in like the girl versus girl sort of thing, and like the human want for gossip and drama, and how we like can't really stop our monkey brains from like wanting that to happen. And so I feel like that's kind of a lot of what spurred this on, of like, should they be having this much chemistry when like they're both attached? And it's been really interesting watching this all happen. So I'm gonna give y'all like a bit of a breakdown. Alex Abad Santos for Vox did a long story called The Drama of Glen Powell and Sydney Sweeney's Off-Screen Chemistry on April 27th. And so this article kind of breaks down the story, Alex's thoughts and personal feelings, but also just like a timeline of sorts. And so they did all the work for me, which was a gift. So basically this film was announced in January of 2023, and it started filming probably in like late February, early March. And so the first Instagram post we get of Glen Powell and Sydney Sweeney is on March 3rd. And in this post, Glen shared this on his Instagram grid. These are grid posts, guys. This is serious business. And in this photo, Alex writes, she's looking up at him the way tourists look at skyscrapers, face and eyes tilted upward with admiration. He's grinning, his top row of teeth shining. Powell captioned the photo, hot box. And so it's like a photo of them behind the scenes of the movie, and it looks like kind of like a mirror photo. Then like a couple weeks later on March 21st, Glenn once again posts photos on his Instagram grid, and this is an 8-picture carousel of him and his sister's family and Sydney Sweeney at the Taronga Zoo in Australia. And so there's like a family photo of Glenn and his sister's family with Sydney Sweeney as like the first photo.
I'm looking at it right now. This is so funny.
And then
family goes to the zoo.
Plus my co-star.
Family and coworker. Not girlfriend, coworker. Goes to the zoo with my entire family.
And the 6th photo in on this slide is just a photo of Glenn and Sydney with a giraffe, and they're all sticking their tongues out as you do in a photo with a giraffe. And Alex,
just me and my coworker having a silly goofy time.
Literally, Alex describes this as, quote, a straight couple's honeymoon. Okay, and then Alex continues to write in this article, the faces Powell and Sweeney are making in all their photos and the proximity of said faces are not giving coworkers. As a person of working experience, I've never been that gleeful to see someone from my job, let alone be that gleeful to hang out with a coworker off the clock. Okay, I feel a little bit bad for Alex. It sounds like he has no friends. But Sydney is also posting photos of her and Glenn on her grid. There's lots of grid posts, which is absolutely crazy. And throughout the filming and the tourism and the family gatherings that Sydney and Glenn are having together in Australia, during this time, Glen Powell also has a girlfriend, and her name is Gigi Paris. And according to a source that talked to People magazine, they started dating in 2019, and they were first spotted together on a trip in January of 2020. And so they've been together throughout all of COVID. And you know, like relationships that survive COVID, that's a big deal. But apparently, according to People's source, they called it quits like weeks prior to like everybody kind of noticing things being weird on the internet, because fans on TikTok were reporting, because they were looking and keeping track of these things, that Gigi unfollowed Sydney Sweeney on Instagram and that she was taking down photos of her and Glenn from her Instagram grid. And on the 27th or the 28th, Gigi posted an Instagram post of her like walking away, and I think the caption was something that was like, on to bigger things or something like that, like something very like, I'm over this. It's done. Kaput. Goodbye. And so the source tells People that Gigi and Glenn had broken up several times and that they'd been on the rocks since Top Gun came out. Gigi was never happy with the long distance filming, and when she came to Australia, they both decided to break up for good. And so People goes on to write that though speculation about Powell's chemistry with Sweeney grew louder when it appeared that Paris had unfollowed Sweeney on social media, a second source says there's no truth to the rumors. Quote, Gigi only unfollowed Sydney on social media because Sydney never followed her back. That's not good. This had nothing to do with Glenn and Sydney. My commentary is that feels like it maybe did. The source goes on to say that Gigi is aware that Glenn and Sydney never hooked up, and that he takes his worth very seriously, and that was tough on the relationship. And the second source continued on to tell People that they're filming a movie that's a romantic comedy. It's like when people say about movie stars, oh, they have such good chemistry. It's just their job. They're friends that met on set. They're co-stars. And the first source like echoes that by saying it wasn't about infidelity. She's on different coasts modeling. He's on different coasts filming. When she left, they were on great terms.
Okay, but like they made this statement after like all the rumors were running around, so
it sounds like
they're very much doing damage control. Yeah,
it sounds like friends are maybe trying to like save ass for Glenn, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Here's my opinion of snooping through the Instagram while Sarah's giving the deets. There were also posts of them like doing waterfall, I don't know, no, they're doing like boat tours and like all this stuff when they're like wearing rain ponchos, and it's, I don't know, but like this is not giving my BFF coworker like at all. And I think this is what a lot of people on the internet have picked up on and are talking about.
Yeah, which is completely fair, but I think also if you are like, we don't know like the name of this movie, we don't know the premise of this movie, like we don't know that much about it other than like the behind the scenes footage that onlookers have gotten from just like them taking over Australia, because this film, according to Glen Powell, worked very closely with like the Australian Tourism Board, so they basically got unfettered access to all of Australia. I would assume that the directors would want to be putting them in real life situations to like get the chemistry closer, like just thinking about it from like a film perspective, because I do feel like it does look like they're going on dates, and or telling them to go, like even outside of filming, telling them to go hang out together and post about it, because it's good PR. It's going to build buzz for people going to see the movie. Yeah, exactly. But there is also like the other side of that discourse of, we don't know when this film's going to come out. Like, is the buzz going to disappear? Like all that stuff. Like, are they doing the buzz too early? You know? And so that's why a lot of people are also being like, this can't possibly be PR, because movies don't have that quick of a turnaround. Like, it's not like we're going to get this movie in like August where we're going to be like, oh my God, remember, like still talking about it. Could be a year. Know? But also at the same time, like they went together to CinemaCon events and are like already talking about this movie. So maybe there is going to be a really quick turnaround. Like, I don't know how quickly rom-coms can get edited. Yeah, I have no idea either, but I would guess they're going to try for a summer release if it is going this quickly, because like thinking about Australia in general and like when a cute summer rom-com would happen. Yeah. And so, I mean, like this got me thinking deeply, because I love I love mess, I love gossip, and I love seeing how the internet reacts to gossip, because I feel like we maybe mentioned this like briefly about the like Good Morning America hosts who were having an affair in like broad daylight. Like I feel like did we talk about this like briefly on the podcast? I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we did, but maybe we just talked about it pre-recording and never talked about it recorded. I don't think we talked about it on the pod. I don't remember. But anyway, basically, like this got me thinking, because recently there were two Good Morning America hosts named Amy Robach and TJ Holmes who were having a very public affair. Like these two were married to different people. Like they have families, and they were just like doing their affair in very public places with like no care to anyone. They're like still together now. They lost their jobs, still together though. And so I feel like we haven't had a good affair in Hollywood in quite some time. And I feel like it's just funny, because whenever there is potential for like chemistry to be conflated into something else, like the public and the tabloids have taken it and ran with it, and we haven't really gotten that moment. And I feel this is giving reminiscent of like the early 2000s, when like you mainly got your news from the tabloids, and then you talk about it at the water cooler at work, or like in your high school cafeteria, or whatever you were doing at that point in time in life. And now it's interesting with like the internet era getting their hands on hot gossip like this, because obviously like Don't Worry Darling was like the gossip that lasted a lifetime, but that was like tumultuous and like, ooh, what's going on? Whereas this is like silly, goofy fun. Like obviously there's potential for people to have gotten hurt, but the way the press cycle is going is it feels very much like, again, there is that like slight sliver of hope that the younger generation of writers are trying to do their due diligence to make sure that they're like acknowledging that the people who aren't involved in the chemistry that we're all excited about are also thriving and doing okay.
Wait, if we're thinking about not just celebrity gossip, but like scandals when it comes to relationships or cheating or etc. And I think part of this is that like in the way that stars are big now is very different from the way that stars are big into the early 2000s. Of like there was a very clearly defined list of A-listers in the early 2000s. And now it feels like this barrier is a little bit more blurred, where it's like I wouldn't consider Glen Powell or Sydney Sweeney A-listers, but like the fact that Sydney Sweeney has he's been in like Top Gun and she's been in Euphoria, and those are two like hugely pop culturally relevant films, and yet I wouldn't consider either of them A-listers. I think that goes to like show something about like how people are famous these days is different from back then. But also in thinking of people being obsessed with cheating scandals, I feel like you talked about Glen's girlfriend, but you haven't talked about the fact that Sydney Sweeney was also engaged to a man.
Thanks so much for bringing that up. I have ignored this man throughout this whole discussion because I don't respect him as a person, which is just a personal opinion. I don't know him.
I know, but I feel like this changes the story.
It does change the story, and thank you so much for asking, and I will give you some information. So Sydney is engaged to a man called Jonathan Davino, who is like 38 or 39 years old, and Sydney Sweeney is 25. They've been together for like 3 or 4 years, I want to say. So Sydney Sweeney and Jonathan Davino got engaged in spring of 2022.
He's only 4 years older than Glen.
That's still a world of difference. He's a restaurant owner and a businessman because, as Sydney Sweeney told Cosmopolitan in 2022, she doesn't date actors or musicians or anyone in entertainment because she wants to be normal.
Babe.
So he is 13 years older than Sydney Sweeney. He has a net worth of $3 million, according to Capital FM. And they started dating in 2018. So that was how many years ago? 5. So she would have been 20, not legal to drink, and he would have been 33. So I don't care if this man gets his heart ripped out and spit on and thrown on the floor, because that's icky. And while Glen Powell is 34 years old, Sydney Sweeney is currently 25, and 25 and 34 feels so much less weird than 20 and 33, which is the age that she was when she met her fiance. So I'm a big, as we all know, I'm a big hater of large age gaps when they exist, when the woman is under the age of 21. Once they're legal to drink, I mean, it still bothers me a little bit until they hit 25, and then after that, it's not my fucking business. Once the girlie is 25, she's a human. She's a full-fledged human. She can do what she wants. Under that, I'm going to have opinions, and my opinion is that this man's feelings don't matter because he preyed on a child, basically.
I think it's just a difference of the fact that they both came into this filming it being an existing relationship.
Yeah, and so that's also why there's
like
more
that
drama.
changes the narrative a little bit.
That's why there's more drama around it. I mean, I personally think that if Sydney Sweeney were to cheat on her old fiance, that's just like her reclaiming her power. But that's, again, just me. Because I'm like, that man took her power away from her by like claiming her when she was a child. So Sydney Sweeney was seen heading home on Thursday. I don't know if home means LA or in Australia, like where they're filming, but she was seen not wearing her engagement ring. And a couple days before that, Jonathan Davino was seen leaving their house with like multiple bags and her dog. Like, people were saying it's their dog. It's Sydney Sweeney's dog. Thank you very much. So I don't really think he's going to steal her dog. I also think that it just looked like he had 2 duffel bags, and that page 6 is exaggerating greatly about him like moving out with all of his things. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't really care about the old man's feelings. The old man, I say, when he's 7 years older than me, but he's an old man. But it definitely does like add to the narrative. I was just ignoring him because I think that their relationship is icky. But this all brings to the point also, like we kind of mentioned earlier, of like how the last time that I feel like I can even really remember this much buzz going on around a potential on-set love affair was Brangelina. Like, I feel like we haven't...
Well, do you not... I mean, why... Like, do you not consider Harry Olivia in this category?
No.
Why?
Because like nobody was excited about it.
Oh.
Like, so like
nobody was shipping it.
Like, if I'm being, I mean, like there were people that obviously like were, but I feel like the Don't Worry Darling of it all, the Harry Olivia of it all, like that was such a different narrative than we're getting around Sydney and Glen, and so different from like Brad and Angelina, which was like there were 2.
It was mostly fans who were talking about it.
Yeah, and like anybody else who like wasn't a fan was just like more interested in the onset drama than they were about like the Harry and Olivia of it all. Because at the end of the day, the Don't Worry Darling drama was only portionally about Harry and Olivia, and there was so much other stuff that people were talking about. Like, it wasn't solely focused on like an onset love affair. There was like so many other focuses of it. Whereas like when you look back of like the Brangelina of it all, there were 2 very specific camps, which were poor Jennifer Aniston or oh my God, Brad and Angelina are so hot. This is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point because I don't pay attention to film world as much as you do.
Yeah.
So like I just would have never paid attention to any like relationships of this caliber. So it is interesting to hear from your perspective, because also like my timeline, my TikTok For You page, like my Twitter timeline, there were like sprinkles of this here and there, but it was not anywhere near as like dominant as it seems like it was for your TikTok pages.
Yeah. And I think also like there's been such a big obsession over the past like few years of like just assuming that any couple that gets together that were on film together are a PR relationship for the movie, that I feel like so often people just don't believe it. They're just like, oh, it's PR. They're trying to promote the movie. I think literally until like a couple months ago, people still thought that Tom Holland and Zendaya were like a PR relationship. And it's like, no, those are two very much in love humans. Like, did you see the way she looked at him when he did? And I think just like also like the only other like really serious like screen to real life relationship that I ever that like I've followed in the past, like I don't even know if it's, I think at this point it's probably been more than a decade, was Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, which I was like obsessed with.
True.
But there was no like, oh my God, what's happening? It was just like, oh, they're so cute. And so I think it's just like the affair of it, like the potential affair of it all.
There was Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, obviously during the Twilight series. They weren't, there wasn't the drama of them being in like other relationships ahead of time, but there was the drama of Kristen Stewart cheating on Rob, or at least appearing to cheat on Rob with like that
old man director,
the Huntsman director.
I forgot about that.
That really rocked the internet.
That did.
They broke up after that.
Yeah. There obviously like has been things sprinkled in, but I think it's like the rom-com.
I feel like the point is that we haven't had one of these in a while. Like the combination of like rom-coms making a comeback, and just like celebrity scandal relationships. There haven't been like a lot recently. I feel like it's just a combination of people being hungry for gossip.
Yeah. And
like both of them being very quintessential, like America's sweetheart. Like Glen Powell very much gives like golden retriever puppy energy. Yeah. And Sydney Sweeney looks like a doe-eyed, like some like the all-American girl. Yeah, she's like the girl next door. I feel like that also plays into it. Yeah, 100%. Them starring opposite each other in a rom-com of it all, like also very much adds to it. I did see one TikTok that was really interesting that was saying how like this is such a big deal because there's been such a lack of chemistry in film over the past few years, where like there's been so many films where we're supposed to be watching it and being like, oh yes, these people definitely fuck 3 times a day, and then you're like, these people would never touch each other ever. And so I feel like that's a really interesting thing to just like think about how like there's been a huge like lack of chemistry, because it's like, I don't know if you remember this, but it's like the internet lost their fucking minds over that like one video clip of Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain on a red carpet where like they had more chemistry than like anybody had seen people have chemistry in Hollywood in like decades. And like people were just like losing their mind. I was like, people are so horny for horniness, like that it's like ridiculous. And it's so funny to think about, because I feel like there have been a lot of complaints as of late that there have been a lot of like love interests in movies that are like so unbelievable, and people are just like, who's gonna fall for this? Like nobody. And I think that also has a lot to do with the fact that like most big movies that are having success are like action films that they like shove romance into because they think that that's gonna like make girls more interested in it. Maybe, I don't know, that's an assumption. But it's like they're trying to shove romance in places that it doesn't belong, between people that like romance doesn't belong with. And I think, again, that was also why To All the Boys I Loved Before did so good, because Lana and Noah had such good chemistry. People were like, oh my God. And then Noah ruined that with his weird airport video. What was his weird airport video? He sent like a Snapchat to a girl that was like, can't wait to see you squirt. And he did it like in public, like walking through an airport. Oh my God. Every now and again I remember that happened and I throw up in my mouth. We haven't seen very much of him since then. Oh my God.
So, I mean, this has been a very exciting week for me personally, because I just love when, like, I love gossip. I'm a slut for gossip. And I also just, like, I love seeing, like, gossip tropes resurfacing, and that, like, people are, like, obsessing over, like, a potential affair. And the fact that this is kind of, like, a fun and juicy potential affair compared to, like, Jenna mentioned earlier with, like, why is this different from, like, the Don't Worry Darling drama of it all, is, like,
it doesn't feel like there's any hate involved with it. I don't know, like, I just haven't seen anyone, like, hating in the way that people hated so much on, like, and Harry and Olivia, Don't Worry Darling, and
and it kind of feels like everybody's, like, it's really interesting because it's like people are rooting for them, but people are also rooting for Glen's ex, Gigi. Doesn't seem like anybody cares about Sydney Sweeney's fiance, but, like, the people who are reporting on this on TikTok, like, have done their research to, like, see what Glen Powell's ex Gigi has been doing and seeing, like, her behavior, and they're like, okay, she's, like, thriving, she's doing fine, she's like, I'm moving on to bigger and better things. And so it's like, it's so interesting kind of watching, because like, we had so many complaints with how people were handling the Don't Worry Darling Harry Olivia of it all, and I feel like there are no complaints to be had, and it's so interesting kind of watching just, like, the evolution of people experiencing, like, Hollywood gossip, and, like, when they experience Hollywood gossip in a way that's, like, not distasteful, because it's like, of course they're going to be shipping Sydney and Glen together, like, why wouldn't they? As Jenna said, it's like all American boy, all American girl, but, like, neither of them really give you the ick about the fact that they're, like, the all American boy and all American girl. And then, like, Glen's hot girlfriend is just gonna, like, probably get more success off of the fact that they broke up than, like, she was gonna get from being with him. Like, Pete Davidson's next girlfriend, who knows?
Yeah. Because I think also, like, if we're just thinking about, like, celebrity relationships that have, like, dominated the news cycle, like, obviously Kim and Kanye, like, Pete Davidson and Kim, since we brought him up, like, Megan Fox and MGK. But I think, like, when it comes to cinema, it's so much different because there is, like, the on-screen chemistry involved with it. It's, like, a double narrative, whereas it's, like, Megan Fox and MGK getting together, like, there wasn't, like, it was just them getting together, which also I personally am offended that they haven't given us updates about their breakup after they did, like, all those interviews together.
I know.
The fact that they did a whole press cycle around their relationship and now they're broken up without a word is unfair, but that's another story. That's for another day.
No, I mean, like, that is a really good point, because obviously, like, people in Hollywood get together all the time, and, like, you don't get to, like, watch it unfurl. You just, like, see them arrive on a red carpet one day and then maybe get a weird relationship press cycle, maybe you don't, like, and so it's kind of fun potentially getting to, like, watch a love story unravel, and even if it wasn't, it's like, just remember all the fun we had speculating, because everybody is genuinely just having a grand old time. Like, this is like, it's so interesting because, again, like, I brought up the Brangelina of it all. Like, I did a ridiculous deep dive of this to, like, a level that was unnecessary for, like, the way we format our episodes now. But, like, just reading back some articles about the Brangelina of it all and, like, the way the world was responding to that, and how there was a lot of speculation about the fact that maybe Brad left Jen because Jen didn't want to have kids, which I think is, like, a really fucked up thing and, like, a conversation for another day. But that was, like, a lot of the narrative. And then so many of, like, the interviews that Jennifer Aniston wound up doing post that, like, turned into, like, this whole weird narrative about, like, how her biological clock wasn't working and, like, maybe she didn't want to have kids. It was, like, really fucked up, like, the way people were talking to her about it, because it kind of went from people being like, oh, an affair, to people being like, wow, Brad and Angie, like, the most amazing couple in all of Hollywood, which obviously is not how things turned out in the end. And so it is just interesting, like, seeing how narratives have shifted, and how with the adding on of social media and, like, Glen and Sydney being able to post their own stuff and making this look like a fun, flirty, good time, and, like, fans being able to react in real time and, like, kind of make the narrative, like, their narrative, instead of just, like, the tabloids being fully in control of it. Like, it's really interesting.
I think also, you mentioned this earlier, but, like, we don't know when this movie is coming out, and if this will still be a topic of discussion at that point. And I think that also is part of like the difference in news cycles between then and now, where we don't know when this movie's coming out. And I feel like it would be most ideal for it to come out this summer, but we have no idea if that timeline is even possible for them. And then is anyone even going to care by the time it comes out? Or is like this relationship going to play out and fizzle out and then no one cares about the movie? Like, I do think that is something that like obviously wasn't a thing in the 2000s, because we didn't have TikTok to talk about these things. Like, we didn't have so much connectivity where we're watching them play out in real time and like talking about them in real time.
Yeah. And like the trend cycle, obviously, as we're like very aware, like moves so much faster now, whereas like back in the day when the tabloids controlled the trend cycle, like they're infamously in the Brad and Angelina situation, like the first ever paparazzi photos of them out together in the world, they orchestrated it. Like, they were on vacation in Kenya, they called the paparazzi, they owned those photos, they made the money off of it, and it was because like they wanted to be able to control the narrative. So it was like it was them doing that on purpose, which was like a very genius thing.
The funny thing about all of this is that like Glenn and Sydney very much had control of the narrative because they were the one dropping the photos, but then everyone else just ran with it. So like I feel like they just like didn't think it through, like whether or not there's like anything actually going on. I feel like they just like didn't think it through.
Yeah, they didn't think like too deeply about those Instagram grid posts and like how seriously people take Instagram grid posting. But I think that just speaks of like celebrities living on like a different like playing field than the rest of us, because
oh my gosh,
you know, like they don't understand that a grid post is like a bigger deal than just like posting to your Instagram
like
stories.
It's literally the soft launch of a potential suitor.
It's so
like,
funny. But yeah, I mean, like but also just like you're completely right in the fact that like it will be interesting, like if this movie isn't coming out really soon, like how they elongate our interest in them. Like, are they going to start guest starring in each other's shows? Like, what are they going to be doing? Like, how
I mean, not to take a note from Harry and Olivia, but they did break up like quickly after Don't Worry Darling drama was over, and then nobody gave a shit, and we were all just like, all of that for nothing.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it will be, I'm really intrigued to like see how this all plays out, and like
and when they do the interviews for the movie,
yeah,
for the
like
cycle,
like all the because they are like, we've already gotten like a slight taste of like them on a red carpet with the CinemaCon red carpet that they did, and there was like one really funny video where like they're talking and they're like kind of far apart from each other, and the more they're talking, Glenn keeps moving forward, so by the like closer to her, and so by the time that it's over, she's essentially just like leaning on him, looking up lovingly, and I was like,
no, this is literally like the Zendaya Tom Holland interviews.
Yeah. Oh my God. So I mean, you know, like we have something to like base off of, like Tom and Zendaya like kind of trying to hide that they were together. So I don't know. It'll be really interesting to watch and see just like how this goes forward. And also like the movie industry acknowledges the positive response to a rom-com, and if this like if this trend continues to go forward, and like them casting like hot young actors with good chemistry to be in rom-coms for us.
Like, who can we break up next?
It's like, where's the drama coming from next? So I'm really excited to see all that. And so with all that being said, with this big discussion happening, I mean, Jenna, I want to hear a little bit from you before we end the discussion for the day, of like, when it comes to like Hollywood gossip, what do you think would be the way to like keep people interested in this Hollywood gossip? Because like we said, like these aren't like A-list celebrities. These are people who like we're interested in because they're hot and young. Like, these aren't household names as of yet. What would your plan be to like keep them in the spotlight?
I mean, the other thing is that rom-coms aren't necessarily A-list movies. Usually,
yeah, not anymore. They once
except
were.
For like except for like that time period in like the 2000s. So it will be interesting, because I'm also like, is this just like a Netflix debut? Like, is this even going to theaters?
I don't know.
You know,
yeah,
I don't know what the rollout for this. I feel like this is like just because Netflix has been doing so many rom-coms, like it would make sense if it was a Netflix movie. But also these are like, I don't know, Euphoria was on HBO, so I guess we'll see, like, is this even a movie theater premiere? Like, you know, what's happening in that regard? I do feel like they need to put this movie out as fast as possible. as soon as possible. And I feel like this is kind of a discussion we had with Don't Worry Darling, of like people waiting and waiting and waiting for this movie to come out and like more information coming out. Because I guess like now I'm assuming they're done with filming. It seems like they're done with filming.
Yeah.
So I mean that was like a pretty quick like a few months of filming, like in March, and this is April, and now they're like, it seems like they're done. Yeah, I don't know. I just think they need to put out that movie as soon as possible, and I think they need to do some interviews that are not even like couple interviews, that they're just like, you know, like the how well do you know your co-star, or like most searched questions, like those types of interviews, because that's where like the natural chemistry starts to come out. So kind of like dropping some of those types of like YouTube fun little interviews leading up to the movie is really, I feel like, because like this is very much like where we are right now is very much like, it seems like the filming just kind of stopped recently, so like there's still momentum as far as like them being together in person, but like now if filming's done, we don't know if they're even gonna be together in person or not. Like, in conclusion, it very much seems like all of this speculation was like, yeah, they're absolutely like together, but like what if it was fake? What if it wasn't true? Like, what if Glenn just broke up with his girlfriend for other reasons?
Yeah, what if the People exclusive is legit and they just broke up because of distance and their careers going in different directions? Like, there is that possibility, and they could, like, he literally could just have chemistry with anyone at any time. Like, who knows? We don't. And I cannot wait to see what happens. So I'm really thankful for y'all joining us on this chaotic journey of today. But I've been losing my mind over this for like a week, and there was so much information going on that I was just like, you know what? We're just going to talk about it today. So if you have any thoughts or feelings on any of this, as per usual, you can come hit us up on social media. We're at Name3Songs on all platforms. And if you have any thoughts or feelings or beef for us personally, you can catch us on socials. I'm at Sarah_Fagan, and Jenna is at Jenna_Million. So thanks for joining us this week on Name3Songs. And until next time, never let anyone make you feel bad about your favorite band.
And remember, you're never too cool to stan Timothee Chalamet.
Don't forget to subscribe to be notified when each episode comes out, and leave us a 5-star review. They really help.
If you want to find out more about any of the sources we referenced in this episode, you can visit name3songs.com.